The grand finals during NA OWCS Stage 4 was the closest yet. Nightmare are the first team to make a grand finals match against Toronto Defiant competitive. Toronto had practically swept every team up until this point, but this time Nightmare took them the whole way to a map 7. Today we're going to look specifically at Cjay's Juno, which is part of the reason that Nightmare are performing so well in this Orisa Juno Brig meta. Ilios is mostly known for its dive potential, with both Lighthouse and Well playing into dive composition's strengths. Today though, we'll be starting on Ilios Runes, the one submap on Ilios that plays more for brawl compositions. Runes is much flatter, and that makes it more difficult to run dive compositions, so both Toronto and Nightmare are going to run the Orisa Brig Juno brawl compositions, which are standard in the current meta. Nightmare have Seeker on Widow, with Zira on the typical Genji, while Toronto have Sugarfree on Tracer, with Merit on the typical Cass. Widowmaker is often used on this specific submap due to just how long the sightlines can get. You practically have sightlines across the entire map, so Widowmaker has been used on this map since the early days of Overwatch 1 in professional play. The default meta composition for Brawl Mirrors is currently Orisa Cass Genji Brig Juno, so why is Sugarfree on Tracer? The answer is Seeker. The only reason to run Tracer over Genji is if you know your opponent will run the Widow, so the Tracer can hunt the Widow in the backline more effectively than a Genji. Of course, our focus today will be on Cjay's Juno, so we won't be too concerned with the Widow Tracer matchup in this video. Both teams start with a rotation into the enclosed lane. This is an interesting choice, particularly for Nightmare, but it does make sense. When playing against a Widow, you want to be careful rotating through an open space or fighting in an open lane, such as the coastal lane in this case, because the Widow has easy LOS, line of sight, of your entire team. So, Toronto, expecting the Widow, rotate through the enclosed lane, making it significantly more difficult for Seeker to find an angle or obtain a pick. One of the best counters to Widowmaker is to just give her less chances to shoot. Walls are her worst enemy, she can't shoot through them, and she doesn't want to fight inside enclosed rooms and areas. Nightmare decide to rotate to the enclosed lane as well, leaving Seeker in his Widow spot further back. This presents a bit of an issue though, because Seeker can barely see the fight, if at all. This means that as long as Nightmare play in the enclosed lane, they're playing a 4v5. Nightmare know this though, and they are only there to try and make it more difficult for Toronto to complete the rotation and close the distance to Seeker. As soon as Toronto offer any resistance, Infected and the rest of Nightmare instantly kite away from the enclosed lane, opening up opportunities for Seeker. Now we can focus on Cjay. He jumps up onto the right side high ground, an effective vantage point that Toronto cannot reach, and focused on keeping Infected alive. Someone is forced to give a bit of space, and so Cjay throws the ring to help Infected push the advantage. After Infected's Fortify expires, he kites away with Cjay continuing to keep him up. Toronto get the first cap, and now Nightmare can look to re-engage. To begin, Cjay makes an important rotation from his high ground position to the back left to stack with Infected on the coast lane. Cjay changes his position because Nightmare are looking to advance further onto point, which Cjay wouldn't be able to support from his previous high ground position. Cjay is also looking to use Orbital as soon as possible, and so he needs to be stacked with the team. In many cases, whichever team builds their Orbital first will win, and Cjay is far ahead of Vega. Infected is really patient here, waiting for Cjay to build the orbital and holding off from using his CDs. The moment that Cjay has built the orbital, he throws a speed ring in the middle of the point and Infected advances. Nightmare try to punish Merit, who's in aggressive position on point, but someone helps him get away just in time. Cjay continues in pursuit, throwing down Orbital Ray. He uses his torpedo shot and it lands on Merit, who is half HP, taking him out. This results in a flip for Nightmare, while the rest of Toronto back away and reset. In this video, I want to talk a bit about when to use Juno CDs, because sometimes you want to hold on to Speed Ring or Torpedoes for certain situations. With Orbital Ray, you usually want to have Speed Ring ready and you will want to throw it into the trajectory of the orbital. For Orbital, you almost always hold on to Torpedoes as well, since they do an increased amount of healing and damage when used in the orbital, and it's very significant. You can burst heal half your team and snipe opponents with your Torpedoes at the same time. Nightmare are at a major disadvantage next fight for one reason: orbital disadvantage. Cjay may have won the fight on the back of his orbital, but now it will be difficult to respond to Vega's orbital. Toronto set Sugarfree behind, ready to spend the entire fight hunting Seeker. Cjay helps Seeker for a moment before turning to assist in the main fight. The most effective way to win a fight while you're at an orbital disadvantage is to play fast, and that is what Nightmare do. As Toronto attempt to rotate through coast, Nightmare immediately use their Terra Search rally combo. Cjay also uses his ring on top of Infected so that he's able to escape after his Terra Surge. Someone matches Terra and Vega uses Orbital to allow someone to win the Orisa versus Orisa matchup. After that, there isn't much Nightmare can do other than reset. Merit swaps over to Cassidy, so now Nightmare are on the optimal composition, and it will be difficult for Sugarfree to find value into Juno Brig, a backline that has significant survivability and sustain. Tracer struggles to secure kills into this backline because she lacks burst damage. This is part of the reason why Genji is favored in this current meta. He specializes in burst damage. This fight, Nightmare now have the orbital advantage, so it's Toronto's turn to attempt to play fast and win at a disadvantage. Cjay starts on his right side high ground position, similar to the first fight. He starts out here because Nightmare do not intend on pushing farther forward to the point in this moment. Cjay know that Toronto will try to play this fast, so he's playing a defensive position that is easier to kite from. As expected, Toronto take things fast, with RuPaul using his rally and Vega using his speed ring aggressively. This fight, Cjay managed to achieve near maximum value with Juno. He begins with a perfectly timed speed ring that allows Nightmare to kite Toronto's engage. Then he uses torpedoes which land on most members of Nightmare. He wraps around from his high ground position and saves Zira before using orbital with perfect timing, saving Infected at low HP and allowing Zira to chase someone with his blade, finishing the kill. After all of that, Nightmare clean up as quickly as they can. Seeker is caught, and Sugarfree uses and subsequently misses his pulse bomb, but that's all Toronto could manage before being wiped. Next fight, guess what? Toronto have orbital advantage. Yeah, this is such a fun meta. And so Nightmare need to succeed this time at shutting it down with what they have. Same game plan as always, play fast into the orbital. As soon as Toronto advance far enough, Nightmare start to move, with Infected practically inting into the backline of Toronto. This is an intentional and effective play though, and Cjay uses his ring to help Admiral and Seeker get into the fight to help Infected. This is where we see another situation that you'd want to hold torpedoes for, Terra Surge. This play from Nightmare is very simple. Infected will go as aggressive as possible into Vega's orbital, and he will try to pull Toronto into his Terra Surge, which also prevents Toronto from following their own orbital. Then Cjay will throw the rest of Nightmare into action with Speed Ring and uses torpedoes on the targets that are all bunched up around Infected. The torpedoes also assist in allowing Infected to survive. Unfortunately, Infected wasn't actually able to live, but the damage had been done. Admiral, who was thrown in earlier by Cjay, uses his rally to prevent Toronto from potentially turning this fight. Someone attempts to escape but is finished by Zira, and so Nightmare have successfully won a fight at an orbital disadvantage. There's one more fight to go, and the advantage is now Nightmare's. Cjay plays confidently with the rest of Nightmare. The only ultimate for Toronto is Terra Surge. Someone dives in attempting to go for the same play that Infected did, but Toronto don't have anything else to follow up, and someone didn't get anything. Cjay uses Orbital, and Nightmare advance without fear. To clean up, Zira uses Blade, and Nightmare take this first round on Ilios.
Miracle right now if you win this if you're Toronto. Oh, the triple Shuriken headshot straight into the Blade. Oh, that's over. No coming back from that one. Rubbing salt in the wounds there. Seeker taking out Sugarfree in the skies. Does Nightmare take the first round?
Before we continue, quick reminder that you can get these videos early through my Ko-fi page. This is the easiest way that you can support me. I keep 95% of the earnings, so if you're interested in supporting me and helping me work on these videos while I'm in university, make sure to check it out. For the second section of this video, we will be moving on to a map later in the series, King's Row, and the score is 2-2. Toronto and Nightmare will once again be mirroring Orisa Brig Juno, with slightly differing DPS lines. Toronto are running Ashe Genji, while Nightmare are running Ashe Pharah. Sugarfree on Genji will be looking to contest the point and control the lane through the hotel, which frees up someone to control the high ground. The reason why someone needs to be up here is because otherwise it would be too easy for Nightmare to set Seeker on the high ground and control a majority of the space on the map. To begin this first fight, Infected immediately moves to contest the high ground and fight someone. It's clear that if someone weren't holding this position down, it would be easy for Infected to completely capture and clear the high ground. Cjay uses his fly to assist Infected while he fights for this position. This allows him to keep out of Merit's LOS. Infected is hit by a javelin and is knocked off, and thus switches to trying to force point. Toronto used Sugarfree to contest and just try to poke Infected out to prevent him from placing too much pressure onto the point and potentially gaining a tick. While this is happening, Cjay is 100% focused on farming Orbital. As long as neither side makes a move, the first to build Orbital is more likely to win. Seeker decides to go for a play, and where he trades his life for root balls. Ashe for Brig benefits Nightmare, so now they have the advantage. Cjay flies around to the left side of the statue to maintain LOS of Infected, who has advanced, using torpedoes to keep him up. Someone finally drops and moves to halt him, so Infected backs off as quickly as he can. Someone attempts to body block Infected, but Cjay is able to maintain LOS using his fly, keeping Infected's armor from breaking, making it that much harder for someone to get the kill. Cjay uses Speed Ring just in case Infected would need to run away to the Mega, but he was fine, and Nightmare are able to clean up and capture the first point. The next fight is pretty anticlimactic. Just as Toronto attempt to turn the corner, Seeker lands a headshot onto RuPaul, instantly ending the fight before Toronto could throw any ultimates. Sugarfree was further in, and so he does his best to dash out and follow the rest of Toronto. Cjay knows that Nightmare can press their advantage and chase for a kill, and so he throws down the ring. Pressing an advantage and chasing kills are both situations where you'll want to use Juno's Speed Ring. With the speed, Infected was able to reach Sugarfree and take him out, which is a decent stagger. Toronto were so scared of this chase that Merit ended up using Bob, which was a silly decision as it hits an already fortified Infected who just walks away unconcerned. Nightmare have 4 ultimates going into the next fight, and Toronto now only have 3. Nightmare decide that after Bob, they want to attempt to put more pressure onto Toronto while they regroup, so Cjay flies behind and throws the Speed Ring on top of Infected to see if he could find any opportunity. The only player there for Toronto was unfortunately someone's Orisa, who wasn't an easy kill, so Nightmare have to use the last of the speed boost to kite away. This valueless engage presents Toronto with an easy opportunity to walk forward and reach the corner before Nightmare can respond with ultimates. Seeker tries to get the Bob off, but it's too late and someone blocks it, throwing it into a bad position with Javelin Spin. Both Juno players throw down their orbital rays on this corner, and Cjay uses his ring and attempts to use his torpedoes. The problem with this play is that Toronto's backline are far away, while Nightmare are at the corner. So as Nightmare try to swing their entire team around the corner with Cjay's orbital ray, someone can use his Terra Surge to instantly punish the swing. Infected can't do the same thing because there's no backline within range to hit with his Terra Surge. Cjay is caught in someone's Terra and falls shortly after, while Sugarfree makes use of the orbital with his blade, able to wipe the rest of Nightmare's backline. Infected also ends up staggered at the end of this fight, unfortunate for Nightmare. To win that fight, Nightmare needed to take a fight a bit more forward while Toronto were rotating through the open space rather than at the corner. That would have allowed Seeker's Bob to obtain value and prevent someone in Sugarfree from easily walking through Nightmare's backline. That also would have opened up the possibility for Infected to push farther forward and trade Terra Surge onto Toronto's backline, which would have, permitted for a fight win. Now we move on to the next fight, which will occur at the same corner. Toronto have a similar setup with someone holding the corner itself and the backline playing the whole way back at the next corner. Nightmare understand that to get value out of Terra Surge, Rally, or Blade, they will need to close the distance, and so Cjay's timing with Ring is very important. Toronto poke Nightmare a bit on their walk up, but Nightmare have enough discipline to hold off from using any CDs until they reach the corner. Right as Infected matches someone on cart at the corner, Cjay throws the Speed Ring, also using torpedoes, and Nightmare play first running at Toronto's backline. Playing first is essentially making the first definitive move in a fight and bringing the fight directly to your opponent's backline. Playing second, which is making the second move, might seem like a bad idea or worse, but we have seen it work out before, such as the fight on Ilios Runes, where Cjay was able to use Speed Ring to help the entirety of Nightmare kite the initial engage from Toronto. Whether you want to play first or second often depends on the ultimates for each team and plenty of other factors. To play first and succeed in this meta, you need good timing with the Speed Ring, and you need to close distance effectively and quickly to prevent your opponent from kiting and responding with ultimates after the fact. Admiral uses Rally to help Nightmare sustain as they close the distance, and Nightmare almost entirely ignores someone, aiming to reach the vulnerable targets in the back. Infected takes Sugarfree's life with Terra Surge, and Zera keeps the pressure up with a blade, although he doesn't find anything since RuPaul was able to bash and whip him away. Now, with the cart closing in on the second checkpoint, Toronto panic to contest, and Cjay uses this opportunity to throw out another set of torpedoes that Toronto cannot avoid. RuPaul bashes in to contest, which was likely a miscommunication since someone was able to touch, and Cjay punishes this with a torpedo and blaster shot to finish the kill. Vega attempts to turn this fight with Orbital, but Infected blocks Toronto from following the path of the Orbital while Cjay and Admiral both pocket Seeker to keep him alive. Cjay throws another torpedo volley that builds the rest of his Orbital, and Nightmare finish off someone and Sugarfree. Now, Nightmare can take the third point with one more good fight, and they have the ultimates to do it, with Cjay having Orbital advantage. Seeker has an idea to try and get value from Bob this fight. He looks to throw the Bob through the right side door to try and bypass someone. To make it more difficult for someone to react, Cjay uses his Speed Ring to accelerate Bob as Seeker throws it out. Unfortunately, the Bob misses, a rather unfortunate end to this play, but the positive is that Nightmare are able to force someone away, allowing for more cart progress. Also, if you haven't already noticed, RuPaul is now on Zenyatta. This Juno Zen backline is a situational variant that is essentially a glass cannon. It can work with longer sightlines, but is risky. This backline is also only good to use on the final area of this map, which is very wide open. Basically, RuPaul can just play close to spawn, and he's very difficult to reach the whole way back there. Unfortunately for Toronto, Nightmare have an easy way to close this distance. Nightmare began by playing slow after the Bob play, waiting for Cjay's ring to be off cooldown. Once Cjay is ready, he throws the ring in front and Infected immediately runs in with Javelin Spin. Cjay uses Orbital and Nightmare's backline use it to advance at little to no risk. Cjay also uses his torpedoes once Toronto move towards the cart to attempt to contest, and when Nightmare have taken a bit more damage. Once Admiral has closed the distance, he uses his rally. Seeker picks up 2 kills walking through the orbital as well, and with that, Nightmare can cap the 3rd point on King's Row attack with a time bank of 229.
Where's the orbital right?
Wow, Sugar Free just explodes. I think everybody shot him in there at once. Riley's going to come in for Admiral too. I mean, how did Toronto Defiant stand up to this aggression? It's not even possible. RuPaul's on 98% towards the Transcendence.
Nightmare would eventually win King's Row, partially due to their massive time bank. Toronto were down 2-3, but they fought back, and fought hard, winning Esperanza, then going on to Lijiang. The series ended with a victory for Toronto Defiant, but this was the most difficult challenge Toronto has faced in a region where they have been mostly uncontested. In the title, I say that Cjay is the best Juno player in North America, and I definitely feel that this is the case, especially based on his performance in this Grand Finals match. Vega isn't anywhere near bad, but I just didn't see as many standout moments from him on Juno. Nightmare, in general, are a team that are working hard and might just be capable of making big moves in Stockholm. I'm personally a fan, so I'm very excited to watch them play in person. That's it for today's video. As always, check out the second channel and the Discord, and also join me on Twitch for live analysis and match co-streams. I'll be covering SSG versus Team Peps live when this video is posted, so if you're interested, make sure to check it out. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back with another video soon.